Joe Budden doesn't want his cast speaking with his ops.
When anybody comes up here, I just see people respond to them differently. Try to handle them in different areas, try to use them to be like, it's manipulative behavior that I see happens when people come up here. Like, I never saw Flip and Mandy do nothing before this.
On the last episode of Joe Budden's podcast, Joe had a heart-to-heart with the fellas, aka his co-host, and he outlined how he may not be feeling how certain members of his show are appearing in spaces with people who he feels are trying to manipulate his platform. Now, I think we have to call it out and just really settle on the fact that he's talking about Rocky Thunder and Mandy. And for those of you who aren't aware, Twitter Spaces have been the playground and the cesspool in which the podcast likes to get money in. Flip, E-Manny, Joe, and other members of the show often go there to speak with fans, but also get into the drama that social audio loves to bring. Well, there was a space that really went left, in which things got revealed that very much tarnished the brand of the Joe Budden podcast. This led to far-reaching ramifications for the show, with Joe Budden's girl Sade even getting involved. So what happened was Rocky Thunder and Joe had finally clashed. This time it was really severe, and they revealed gossipy, bad stuff about each other, and it kind of was a gateway into the past life of Joe Budden. Y'all know they always talk about the compound days in Jersey, where they used to have fun and pool parties, but Rocky was someone who was there as well, and so was Joe, and so was E-Manny. And to be quite honest, growing up in New York City, you actually heard about Joe Budden's compound. And when I was in college, a lot of the girlies was trying to go up there, and Lord knows what types of debauchery went down. Well, now that Joe is the media mogul himself, he is trying to distance himself from that part of his life. And when he confronted Rocky and Rocky confronted him, all of that came back to the surface. And one more thing that was crucial that night is E-Manny was on the space, but he didn't ride for Joe like he usually does. And I think it could be that him and Rocky are now cool. Another key point that would happen as a result of this is Joe's girl, Sade, would press E-Manny for not choosing a side and rolling with the ops. Now, who the ops are is a bit of an umbrella term because she's talking about Rocky and also the spaces in which she collaborates, has built equity within the community. It's this faction called WeWorks, which is comprised of people like me and other creators on YouTube, The Files with Dub, Tog FNF TV. So she is giving an edict to E-Manny to not appear in those spaces anymore. But E-Manny wasn't the only one targeted in this rant by Joe. Flip, who was trying to position E-Manny as some kind of, easily manipulated fellow, was also exposed for how he's operated with some of Joe's ops. Now, Mandy is a notorious figure within the JBP universe. I think most people know her as the host of Horrible Decisions, but there was a business venture between Joe and Mandy where they would launch See the Thing Is. And See the Thing Is was a minorly successful podcast, but they would have legal issues with the Joe Budden network when they tried to separate from his network. Anyway, Mandy felt like she was sold a bill of goods and used by Joe. And ever since then, she's been trying to lay the seeds of discord by, telling Flip that he's worth a lot of money to Joe because he actually had a brand before he arrived to the JBP. Though I feel as if Joe's saved Flip because his brand wasn't really that good when he arrived at the podcast. And also telling E-Manny that he should be getting paid off of the basketball game. So even though Joe likes to say that him and Mandy are cool, I think deep down in places he don't want to say, he knows that Mandy is feeding his cast information about the compensation they should be receiving on the show. Well, Now, years after Joe had taken this stance that a lot of the cast members can do what they want, he seems to be reversing course. And I'm telling you all, it was as a result of that space he did with Rocky. He knows a lot was exposed, and I think he feels as if he has to get ahead of it. And the best way he knows how is to give an edict. But Joe also laid the groundwork for another person who is being manipulated on spaces, Mark Lamont Hill.
When Mark came up here, or when anybody comes up here, I just see people respond to them differently. Like, it's manipulative behavior that I see happens when people come up here.
Yeah, so Joe knows that spaces could be a big problem for him, and he wants the cast to do what he says. But the reason he hasn't been explicit about it is because of his past. Joe Budden is notorious for being friends with the opps of his friends. Remember Mouse Jones and Rory? Rory and Mouse Jones were on that elevator, and Rory would see Mouse and Joe talking, and Joe would stop talking to them, but then he would accelerate the situation by saying, Mouse, don't worry. Rory isn't going to hit you. Also, with Rory and Maul, Joe Budden was cool with academics. Now, I know it's a bit of a different type of situation, but, academics was dissing Rory and Maul so much. Joe didn't even try to play interference and let that situation bubble and burst out of control. But I think as we move forward, what you will see now is E-Manny, Ish, Ice, and the rest of the cast, even Mark Lamont Hill, be cautious about where they go on spaces. This is a severe departure from the Cavalier Joe that we usually see. Usually he's just like, oh man, I love the engagement. I love the entertainment. And I would even say Sade stepping in is a big issue because Sade stepping to E-Manny is odd to me, largely because E-Manny has known Joe for a far longer time. Was Sade around when E-Manny was taking shorts on tour? Was Sade around when E-Manny was swinging on dudes for Joe? Was Sade around when E-Manny was, on stage at SOBs with nobody in the crowd, being Joe Budden's hype man while stifling his career by being attached to a fledgling rapper? Granted, now Joe holds the car in his favor, but she wasn't around for all of that. So for her to step to E-Manny like this, I find it a bit odd. And if Joe is not saying anything, that means he completely agrees with what Sade told E-Manny. And I want to circle back to a point I made earlier. Flip is a great manipulator because he is trying to browbeat E-Manny for being cool with people behind the scenes. And that's exactly what he does. Not just Mandy, but Adam 22. Adam 22 DM'd Flip about, hey, how much is Joe Budden paying you?
No, I do like Queen's Flip, but no, our conversation, I think I DM'd him and said, what are they paying you? And then he...
And what did Flip do? He used that information to try to leverage a better situation on the Joe Budden network. So for all of the cloth talk, for all of the, oh, I'm cool, I'm riding with my man's Joe, it's not reflected in his actions. And it's really self-preservation and shows the faulty nature of the streets. A lot of that street stuff that not just Flip, but other street creators, quote unquote, espouse is manipulation. They want you to feel like they're loyal to you so they can get something on the back end. And that's what you see with Flip. All right, y'all, but let me know what you think. Remember, tap in with Joe's show. It's great, especially this episode. It was 2 hours, very short, which I like. I don't like long pods. I know a lot of people be at work and be like, just want long pods. That's not my bag. And I think short, tight shows probably more often is the better way to go, because oftentimes the Joe Budden podcast is bloated and makes it feel missable. But let me know what you think in the comments. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Patreon, The Stop TV. And follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.